Right then, here we are once again at last, where today we're finally going to take a little look at the technical details of everyone's favourite Soviet light tank, the BT-5. Now, before we begin, let me just remind you that the history of the BT-5 is discussed in Part 1, and the example battles will be shown in Part 3. This video here will be covering the technical details only. So, without further ado, let's grab the biggest, most unwieldy spanner we can find, smear ourselves with the engine oil of our foes, and rip the mechanical guts out of the technical details of the BT-5. In War Thunder, the BT-5 is a Rank 1 Battle Rating 1.0 Reserve Soviet light tank. It has a crew of 3, the driver, the gunner, and the commander/loader. It is armed with one non-stabilised 45mm 20K anti-tank gun mounted in a turret with 360 degrees of rotation. The gun itself has 25 degrees of elevation and -8 degrees of depression. Additionally, a coaxial 7.62mm DT machine gun is provided to the right of the primary gun. For the 20K gun, 86 rounds of ammunition are provided, although in battle I'd recommend carrying no more than 30 rounds in order to reduce the likelihood of an ammunition explosion should the tank be hit by enemy fire. The 45mm 20K has access to two types of ammunition. The default BR-240 is an armour-piercing high-explosive ballistic capped shell, which provides 59mm of armour-piercing capability at 500 meters, or 2.3 inches at 547 yards. It contains 19 grams of A-IX-2 high explosive, equivalent to 29 grams of TNT, or 0.7 and 1 ounces respectively, which is detonated approximately 1.2 meters or 3.9 feet after perforating at least 9mm or 0.4 inches of armour. Additionally, the BR-240 SP shell is provided at 2 silver per shot. This is a basic armour-piercing shell and as such contains no explosive filler. It provides 62mm of penetrative capability at 500 meters, or 2.4 inches at 547 yards. The BR-240 SP provides only a slight improvement of penetrative capability over the BR-240 shell, while sacrificing its explosive effect, which severely limits the damage it can inflict, so I would recommend carrying only 3 of these shells, as most potential enemies that the BT-5 would encounter can be defeated easily by the standard BR-240 APHEBC shell anyway. For the coaxial DT machine gun, 1,890 rounds of ammunition are provided, loaded into 30 63-round pan magazines. Only one ammunition configuration is available for the DT, which consists of alternating armour-piercing incendiary bullets and armour-piercing incendiary tracer bullets, which provides 7mm of penetration at 500 meters, or 0.3 inches at 547 yards. This weapon, like most coaxial machine guns in War Thunder, is useful for clearing brush, probing vehicles to see if they're dead, or indeed for engaging soft targets. In my opinion, the 45mm 20K gun is the best low-tier tank gun in War Thunder. It's rapid fire, with a 3 to 4 second reload time. It can pierce the armour of virtually any target it's likely to encounter, and not only that, its shells explode once they've penetrated. The only issue is that at long range, shots can sometimes go where you didn't quite aim them. But as long as you hit anywhere on your target, odds are you'll probably kill it. The BR-240 SP is an almost useless shell. It sacrifices its explosive capability for only a marginal improvement in penetrative capability. You'll be just fine not carrying any BR-240 SP shells, but I usually take 3 along just in case I happen to encounter something like a Shah B1 BIS. It won't do anything anyway, but at least you can say you tried. The gun itself is not stabilised, meaning that getting it on target, especially while moving, can be difficult. Additionally, any tank with a stabilizer will have an inherent advantage if you run into each other unexpectedly. He'll likely be able to get his gun pointed at you faster than you can get yours pointed at him. For this reason, I'd advise caution in built-up urban areas and other places with close confines. Don't just go bombing around the streets at top speed, because many enemies out there will be quicker at reaction fire than you. Approach built-up areas with caution, plan your attacks, and use your mobility to attack from unexpected directions, so that the enemy's gun likely isn't pointing at you when you career round a corner. Both the turret traverse and gun elevation gear are manually operated, and so are a little slower than some contemporary electric or hydraulic turrets. But the low weight of the BT-5's turret nonetheless gives you a fair degree of rotation speed. At 12.1 degrees per second, when fully upgraded, the BT-5 can turn its turret a full 360 degrees in about 30 seconds, depending of course on crew proficiency. The gun can elevate from its maximum depression of -8 degrees to maximum elevation of +25 degrees in approximately 11 seconds at a rate of 3 degrees per second, which means that, again, anything with a partially stabilized gun will be able to shoot at you before you can shoot at them, especially if you both come to a sudden stop at the same time. The power plant consists of a single KHPZ M5 V8 petrol engine, delivering around 365 horsepower or 272 kilowatts. This drives a rear-mounted manual gearbox with 3 forward gears and 1 reverse, allowing the BT-5 to reach a top speed of 53 km per hour or around 33 miles per hour, a speed which the BT-5 is perfectly capable of reaching on level terrain. The maximum speed in reverse is about 11 km per hour or 7 miles per hour. In reality, of course, it was possible to remove the tracks and run the BT-5 on wheels alone, which would have granted a top speed of almost 72 km per hour or 45 miles per hour. However, in War Thunder, sadly, this is not possible. Despite this, the BT-5 is one of the fastest, most agile low-tier tanks in the game, being only 4 km per hour slower than the M22 Locust. Armoured cars are of course a lot faster, but then they don't possess the BT-5's ability to drive at top speed both on and off-road, so I think it evens out. The BT-5's reverse speed is a little on the slow side, however, meaning that you'll be able to get yourself into trouble a lot faster than you'll be able to get yourself out of it. For this reason, I'd say turning around and running away is better than reversing in the BT-5. The armour of the BT-5 consists entirely of rolled homogeneous steel plates riveted to a frame. It is, for the most part, only 15mm thick and should not be relied upon. However, the well-angled front plates can occasionally cause a lucky bounce. The thickest armour is at the front of the BT-5's pointed hull, at 40mm or 1.6 inches, which is sufficient to ward off some low-velocity or small-caliber guns, such as the 37mm KWK-36 mounted on early Panzer IIIs. This is a very small piece of armour, however, and shouldn't be relied upon. It's really more there to act as a sort of bumper. The lower glacis plate is 30mm or 1.2 inches thick, as well as being sloped back at -62 degrees, which is very likely to cause a ricochet. However, nobody's going to be aiming for your lower glacis, so that if you get hit there, it was probably not intentional. The upper glacis plate of the BT-5 is only 13mm or 0.5 inches thick, and despite being sloped back at 61 degrees, it's just not thick enough to protect you from anything. You might occasionally get a lucky bounce, but don't count on it. What's more is that the driver's hatch is only sloped to 18 degrees, meaning that even though it's 20mm or 0.8 inches thick, it acts as a giant weak spot. The sides of the BT-5's hull front are its most effective armour, because although they're only 15mm or 0.6 inches thick, they are very well angled at around 70 degrees, meaning that most shots that hit there will ricochet, provided that the shell isn't large enough to overpenetrate, of course. This only works, however, if the BT-5 is facing directly towards whatever is shooting at it, meaning that they'll probably aim for the driver's hatch, so again, do not rely on the BT-5's armour. The turret is 15mm or 0.6 inches thick all round, save for the gun mantlet, which is 20mm or 0.8 inches. Odds are that unless a shell hits the edge of the turret cylinder, anything shooting at the BT-5's turret will be able to penetrate it. The hull sides are 15mm or 0.6 inches thick and slab-sided with no sloping whatsoever, meaning that even some machine guns can punch straight through. The hull rear is even thinner at 13mm or 0.5 inches, meaning that it's much the same story. Both the hull and turret roofs are only 10mm or 0.4 inches thick, meaning that aircraft armed with heavy machine guns can easily strafe a BT-5. All this means that basically you should always treat the BT-5 as if it has no armour whatsoever. Instead, use your speed to avoid being shot at in the first place. Only then can you operate the BT-5 to its full potential. The interior layout of the BT-5 is conventional, albeit quite compact, meaning that any shell that penetrates the vehicle's armour, even a solid shot, is likely to critically damage several vital components. In the hull front sits the driver, and directly behind him, crammed side by side in the turret, are the gunner and commander/loader. Because of the close proximity of these three crew members, it is very easy to kill at least two with any penetrating shot, which in turn kills the tank. In front of the driver's face is a glass vision block, and around his feet are the pedals and levers that are linked through rods and cables to the engine and gearbox in the back to control the tank's movement. As far as I can tell, these do not have a hitbox, so don't worry about a frontal hit potentially damaging the transmission. Around the base of the turret is the horizontal traverse mechanism. Although this is often a weak spot in more heavily armoured tanks, on the BT-5 odds are that if the turret ring is damaged, the rest of the tank is also destroyed, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Even if it does jam, the BT-5 is nimble enough to engage other tanks effectively, even with a stuck turret. Under the turret floor is the tank's main ammunition reserve. Removing ammunition from the tank is usually done top down, so if you carry no more than 30 shells into battle, the actual number may vary of course, this will ensure that only this ammunition rack is filled, thus drastically reducing the likelihood of an ammunition explosion if you get hit in any of the other racks scattered around the fighting compartment. This means that, if you have any sense about you, the ammunition racks on the hull walls, on the sides of the turret, and in the turret bustle will all be empty. Between the heads of the two crew members and the turret is the breech for the 20k gun. If you're lucky, it can act as a bulkhead if the turret is penetrated from the side, meaning that although it will certainly be destroyed, it may save the life of the crewman on the other side, allowing the tank to fight on. On the left of the gun breech is the elevation gear and the telescopic gun sight, which offers between 1.9 and 3.5 times magnification. On the right is the coaxial DT machine gun. On either side of the turret is a simple glass vision block, and the gunner has access to a rotating periscope on the turret roof. On either side of the bulkhead separating the fighting compartment from the engine compartment are two fuel tanks. The BT-5 runs on petrol or gasoline for my American viewers, so expect it to catch fire or even explode if hit. In the centre of the engine compartment is the 365 horsepower or 272 kilowatt KHPZ M5 V8 petrol engine, with two radiators, one on either side. This, coupled with a rear-mounted transmission featuring 3 forward gears and 1 reverse, allows the BT-5 to reach a top speed of 53 km per hour or 33 miles per hour, as well as 11 km per hour or 7 miles per hour in reverse, as I said previously. This is connected via a rear-mounted inverted drive sprocket to a set of simple all-metal tracks. The sprocket features 8 rollers which mesh with the track's central guide teeth. This system is in many ways better than a conventional drive sprocket, in that it's quieter and produces less friction. However, it's also more complicated to construct, and there is a limit as to how much weight can be moved by a single guide tooth, which is why heavier Soviet tanks, such as the KV-1, had conventional drive sprockets. The tracks run over 4 pairs of large rubber-rimmed disc road wheels to a pair of front-mounted rubber-rimmed idler wheels, where the track tensioning gear is located. For more information as to how the track tension of the BT-5 is adjusted, I would recommend seeing the Chieftains Inside the Hatch video about the BT-7. The same principle applies to the BT-5. This tank also features no return rollers, the road wheels being large enough to act as their own rollers. The tracks themselves consist of usually around 46 links, with every other link featuring an aforementioned guide tooth. The tracks are interconnected using single pins, a system inherited by the T-34. One problem with these tracks in reality were that because they are quite long and flat, they would start to bend around the drive sprocket and idler wheel, which has rather negative connotations for the ride quality. In reality, as you know, the tracks of the BT-5 could be removed, allowing the tank to run solely on its road wheels. The rear pair would be linked to the transmission via a set of gears, and the front pair featured the paraphernalia that allowed them to steer via a steering wheel in the driving compartment. You can see the steering linkages just in front of the forward pair of road wheels. Unfortunately, in War Thunder, the tracks stay on. At the front of the tank, draped around the nose, are the towing chains. These can also be used to attach the unditching beam to the tracks. More on that later. Behind the towing hooks are a pair of rather prominent headlights, which certainly contribute to the vehicle's cuteness. In the upper glacis plate is the driver's hatch. This features 2 flaps that open outwards, allowing the driver to exit. Alternatively, the upper hatch can be propped open, allowing him to see where he's going when not in combat. Otherwise, the driver sees the world through a simple vision slit, which does at least feature a pane of glass for weather and shrapnel protection. As you can tell by all the little bumps running along the armour seams, this BT-5 is riveted together, or at least the hull is. Not sure if the implications for this are modelled into War Thunder, but I would imagine not. The turret is of welded construction, aside from the gun mantlet, which is bolted on. On the turret sides are a simple vision slit with glass and a pistol port for close encounters. In the turret rear is a large door, which is used to load ammunition, or indeed to remove the gun itself. On the turret roof is a rotating periscope for the gunner, a basic ventilation fan, and a small hatch through which the commander can poke signal flags. Behind all this are a pair of simple forward-opening access hatches, allowing the gunner and commander to exit. There are also 3 loops on top of the turret, which can be attached to a crane in order to remove it. I'm not entirely sure what that rather lewd object poking up at the back is. My guess would be it's a handle to make getting in and out of the turret easier. On top of the hull on either side there are 3 nodule-looking things. These are the tops of the guide rods for the Christie suspension system. There is also a cover for the fuel port and oil filler. The covers are bolted down to prevent any cheeky fins from dropping incendiaries down into the fuel tanks in the heat of battle. The track fenders are built to act as shelves for the tracks when the tank is in its wheeled configuration. Those leather straps ensure the tracks don't fall off when in transit. It would be rather embarrassing to turn up for battle only to find that your tracks have fallen off somewhere along the road. There is also a tarpaulin, which can be used to cover the tank for weather protection and camouflage, as well as a pair of spare track segments. On the other side is the ubiquitous Russian unditching beam, i.e. the famous log. There is also a toolbox, which is locked to prevent those pesky fins from nicking your spanners, as well as another couple of spare track links. On the engine deck are a pair of air intakes. These are for air to cool the engine via the radiators. On top of the starboard vent cover is a handy spade, useful for unditching the tank, or indeed for digging a latrine pit. In the middle is the engine access hatch for minor repairs, in the centre of which is the cover for the air filter used to clean the air used in combustion. For major repairs, the entire engine cover would be unbolted and lifted off. At the back, underneath the grating, is the radiator air output vent. Moving back, even further back that is, mounted to the rear is a rather large muffler with 4 little exhaust vents. And on the port side is a simple rear/convoy light. Those 2 loudspeaker looking things are actually the jacks. Rotate the handle around the centre to make it go up and down. And below that is the final drive assembly, complete with brake drums, as well as 2 towing loops. As for camouflage options, the BT-5 comes with the typical selection for Soviet vehicles. By default, you get a plain green colour scheme. This was called 4BO, and was painted on in the factory. This camouflage works in helping you to not stand out in most environments, but the application of dirt and foliage always helps to break up hard edges and such. The first camouflage pattern you'll unlock by defeating 14 players is Bicolour Desert Camouflage. This consists of a wavy pattern of type 4BG light khaki or sand, painted on top of what appears to be red primer. I haven't found any reference to this particular pattern being used in reality, but it's possible that the Red Army utilised it during the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran. Or, more likely, it is a post-war camouflage pattern. Needless to say, use it in desert environments if you want to. The second camouflage you'll unlock after destroying 20 player-controlled vehicles is winter camouflage, useful on, as the name might suggest, winter maps. Winter camouflage was first applied to Soviet tanks during the Winter War against Finland, and again during the Battle of Moscow in the winter of 1941-42. The process essentially involves Type B white paint being issued to tank crews who were then responsible for slapping it onto their tanks over the existing camouflage in a manner which they or their commanders saw fit. This could range from the rather basic manner as seen here to more elaborate patterns to solid white in some cases. However, because orders were issued to immediately strip the white paint off as soon as the snow melted, it's reasonable to assume that most crews didn't spend too much time making their tanks look particularly pretty during the wintertime. The fourth camouflage you can unlock for destroying 26 enemies is forest camouflage, also known as tricolour summer camouflage. This scheme was created near the end of 1941 as a measure towards better concealment for Soviet tanks on the defensive, which had suffered heavy losses during the German invasion. Up until this point, camouflage had been a secondary consideration for Soviet tanks, as the Red Army had always been envisioned as an offensive force. Because a tank that is driving around on the attack is difficult to camouflage, it was decided to paint them all a basic green and have done with it. Now that the Soviets were on the defensive, however, better camouflage was needed. Armoured Command therefore ordered that tanks and artillery pieces were to be painted in a 3-tone scheme made up of the already applied Type 4BO green, as well as Type 7K yellow and Type 6K dark brown. Although how this camouflage was to be applied was mostly left up to individual units, some basic instructions were given, such as how to disguise the barrel of a gun. Additionally, the use of stencils and templates was strictly forbidden, in order to give tanks a less uniform, more organic appearance, hence why you can see rough edges and brush strokes in the pattern. Tricolour summer camouflage was mostly used during 1942, especially around areas of marsh or woodland, and in areas of relatively static fighting such as around Leningrad. When the Red Army went on the general offensive in 1943, however, the tricolour scheme was dropped and tank camouflage reverted once again to plain green. Some artillery and tank destroyer battalions retained their 3-tone camouflage due to its usefulness in ambush, but most tanks were painted plain green until the end of the war. If you have a bit of money lying around, you could spend 200 gold on some more fancy camouflage schemes, such as tricolour European camouflage, as used during the Soviet invasion of Poland in 1939, tricolour desert camouflage, which was actually used in Iran, or late bicolour winter camouflage, which could actually have been applied at any stage of the war. Alternatively, you can get this nice user-made paint scheme of a BT-5 of the Spanish Republican Armed Forces, with an overall tan colour, but with the added benefit of the Spanish Republican flag being painted around the turret, which will surely put fear into the heart of anyone driving an Italian tank. All in all, the exterior of the BT-5 is simple and nicely laid out, albeit lacking in the tools department. Where, for example, is the pry bar? Other than that, the BT-5 is a nice, compact, good-looking tank. Combine that with the excellent speed and manoeuvrability, as well as the 45mm gun, and the BT-5 is capable of being a formidable weapon. It is entirely possible for a good player to completely carry a game with this tank. Bear in mind, however, that with this tank's lack of armour and rather cramped interior, that a mistake made when driving the BT-5 can very easily be fatal. Do not count on this tank being able to take even a single hit. Other than that, I believe the BT-5 to be the second best reserve tank in War Thunder, beaten only by the M2A4 light tank. And with that brings this video of the technical details of the BT-5 to a close. If I've gotten anything wrong or left something out, do tell me in the comments. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and thank you especially for being ever so patient during these long gaps between videos. I'm working on reducing them, but I guess you'll know the results of that soon enough. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again for part 3, where I'll show you a couple of example battles of how the BT-5 can be used properly, and how perhaps it should not be used. Anyway, thank you very much for watching again, and goodbye.